follow Dr. Schatt and Dr. Logan is a tough act to follow. Will, thanks for inviting me to be here. This is fantastic. It's my first time back downtown since 9/11, and it's so great to be back in this building. It's actually quite impressive. I want to set the context for my remarks for the afternoon for a little bit before I get into it. It will not be as brilliant as Dr. Logan or Dr. Schatt. It'll be of a different genre. I study the future for a living. I've been doing it for about 10 years, which is terrible for Thanksgiving dinners and sort of when you get together with your family. It's always interesting when folks go, well, how successful are you at that? And I go, well, marginally. And it's kind of a disappointment for my parents. Having said that, in the business of studying the future, marginal success is quite awesome, right? Because you're wrong 99% of the times, and usually you're only right about 1% of the time. I execute that in the context of a role called a Chief Digital Officer. How many people here have heard of the Chief Digital Officer? Okay, so about 30%, of which most are people that I know. I want to articulate the role just a little bit for you so you have a context of my point of view and where the remarks are coming from and why that might be meaningful for the book that we're here to celebrate. The Chief Digital Officer is someone that focuses specifically on the next generation P&L of a business. And so let me dissect those remarks for a little bit. The last C-level title that was launched in companies was the Chief Information Officer. How many people know Chief Information Officer? Good, we're getting on the same page here. Prior to that, it was the Chief Marketing Officer, and it's usually some macroeconomic trend that creates the strain for these types of titles. The Chief Marketing Officer was introduced when we figured out that the competition is important and brand differentiation is important in commerce. Chief Information Officer, obviously that's somewhat simpler, right? It was the innovation revolution. The reason why the Chief Digital Officer exists and why people study the future and the study of the future contextualizes what has been remarked about this afternoon is because of one single truth. And that single truth is that customer cycles are resetting. Customer expectation cycles are resetting. Let me just explain to you what I mean by that. I had a Walkman as a kid. I was about 16 years old, very excited about the Walkman. It played one cassette player. I was fantastically excited by it. I tell you, I used to use it to like talk to girls. It was a real good waist piece, at the time to have conversations. And I heard that the Walkman 2 was coming, and I could not be more excited by it. I was one of those kids that sat in the front step, kind of tapping my foot, waiting for it to show up. It took 18 months to get there, and it was a phenomenal improvement. It played 2 cassettes, 100% improvement in 18 months. Today, Samsung rolls out a new phone every 30 days, and it doubles the capacity on everything. So this type of reset of product is creating a macroeconomic strain within industries where customers are constantly looking for the new product. And so if you think about large enterprise, in the past, the Chief Marketing Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, the CIO, they sort of were there to manage the status quo. And companies kind of accidentally stumbled on the next version of the product along the way because you had 18 months or 5 years. Today, when you have about 6 to 12 months, someone has to deliberately study the next generation P&L. Someone has to be ahead of the curve looking for what the next product is going to be as a function of the C-suite. Because you don't have the luxury of automatically stumbling on it anymore because of the shortening of the time span. This is what I do, and these are going to be my remarks. So, when Will asked me to give this speech, I could have talked about a ton of stuff. I could have talked about med devices, hacking, patient self-diagnostic, quantified self. I've given a lot of these speeches before, and I kept coming up going, this is really not how you figure out healthcare in 25 years. By the way, I was given 2 choices, speak about healthcare in 50 years or 25 years. I underperformed and chose for 25 instead of 50. Although 50 years would have been easier to speak about because it would be so esoteric, right? None of these actually made sense because none of them individually is going to create the type of macro transformation that we want in an industry to actually get healthcare to where we want it to be. And I landed upon sort of this euphoric moment. I don't know whether it was a lack of sleep or not. I was flying back from Beijing, and on one of those long flights, I just realized that healthcare is not really suffering from a lack of vertical innovation. And by vertical, I mean healthcare-specific innovation. There's tons of innovation in healthcare. What healthcare is suffering from is a lack of effective adoption of horizontal innovations. What healthcare is suffering from is a lack of effective adoption of horizontal innovations. And I'll describe what I mean by vertical versus horizontal innovation. In order to do this, I want to take you through this thought experiment. I want you to think about 1991, which was 25 years ago. And think about if I was giving this speech in 1991 about what healthcare would look like in 2016. Now, I just want to remind you a few things about 1991. I'm not going to list them all down, but I'd like to highlight that we had already launched a shuttle to space 10 years ago. So you would imagine that in 1991, we would imagine that certain things would be awesome about healthcare. Healthcare would probably look like this in 1991, right? Do you see how awesome that is? We thought in 2016 it would look like this. Does it look like this today? Not really. This is not even a real provider. It's a marketing person. I got this from stock photography, right? We thought that a lot of things would go away. We would probably never see this again by 2016, right? We thought that the looks on our doctors' faces would never look like this again. We also thought that the healthcare experience, we would never have to do this again. But it's 25 years, and we're here. 10 years after we launched a rocket into space. And we're still here. And so, I don't want to make it sound like it's all shit. It's pretty good. We still have some cool stuff, right? Most doctors' offices look like this. There's an iPad, there's a laptop, there's a phone, there's a microscope, which, by the way, was invented 500 years ago. It's kind of sad, actually, right? They're still using that device, okay? But for the most part, we have been underperforming as an industry. We've been largely underperforming as an industry when compared to other industries. I worked in financial services, I worked in risk, I worked a little bit in transportation, I worked a little bit in engagement. And that's because we've mostly only been looking at our vertical innovations. And I believe the opportunity is here for us to look at our horizontal innovations over the next 25 years, and this is how we catch up. So to really describe what I mean by vertical versus horizontal, is David in the room? David left. Oh, you're there. Oh, okay. David is the expert on innovation, so I'll hold you to keep me honest, right? So if you think about penicillin, it's a vertical innovation. It's something specific to an industry, okay? I'm glad you talked about earlier that, Will, and we didn't compare slides, so it's good. I'm within the same topic area here. If you think about the invention of a wheel, a horizontal innovation, it affects every single industry you can expect. And it was adopted by every single industry, right? There's not one industry that doesn't use the wheel anymore. And if there is, they're pretty silly, right? Something like the microwave, a very vertical innovation. The food industry. Something like electricity, a horizontal innovation. Massively adopted by every industry and created macroeconomic differentiation within a period of 25 years. Something like a wearable watch. A pretty vertical innovation, if you ask me, right? Mostly sort of digital health focused right now. I mean, most of us had watches before. I'm not sure what the guys at Apple were thinking, right? If you think about something like the internet, a very horizontal innovation, okay? The question is, how good is healthcare at picking up these horizontal innovations? And are there any more horizontal innovations coming for it to leapfrog? I love these guys from Gapminder. You guys ever seen this chart? It's a very interesting chart when you think about wealth and health together. You can see the line of correlation here. I'll let someone from Gapminder defend the causation, but there's clearly correlation. What happens with innovation is that this part of the world usually get all of the horizontal innovations, all of the vertical innovations, but they also get all of the crap. This is the part of the world where we try all of our innovations, our vertical and horizontal ones. So you get all the stuff that fails as well. You remember the Zune? right? The other countries didn't have to incur the Zune because it failed in these countries before it made it to the other parts of the world. This part of the world gets the horizontal innovations as well, internet, electricity, all that type of stuff, but they get the good vertical innovation. They don't have to suffer through the crap. This part of the world gets the horizontal innovation, barely sees the vertical innovations. Barely. Microwaves, not around in these 4 billion people. But electricity is there. A mobile phone, not really around. Well, that's getting better. But internet is there. Healthcare is there, but not all the drugs. And this group of people don't get crap. They don't get anything. We call them the last billion. So when you think about horizontal versus vertical, and you think about what can I do in healthcare, why is it that we seem to underperform the other industries when we're so smart? I mean, there's more scientists in this room than I've ever met in my life. I'm presuming you're all like scientists, right? There's a great theory of this. It's called the theory of diffusion of innovation. How many people have seen this theory? From a guy named Everett Rogers. Good. I'm still within the right context. Excellent. Right. So this is the famous crossing the chasm story. Right. Most vertical innovations get to about here. Right. For those of you who've never seen this chart, it says all innovation gets adopted like this. There's 2.5% of people in the world that'll buy anything. Right. The other 13.5, they're early adopters. Early majority is there, and the 16% over here are people like my mom. Like, she wouldn't buy a smartphone until like they wouldn't sell her the flip phone anymore, right? And a lot of horizontal innovation makes it to this side of the curve. So we really have to think about what are we betting on to transform healthcare? If we're thinking about healthcare in the next 25 years, what are the things we should be focusing on, or at least what are the things that we're not focusing on that we should be focusing on? Let's take a look at a couple of things. The internet was a horizontal innovation, right? We will argue to death about how well that served healthcare. I'll wrap cloud inside of the internet, right? Genomics is a vertical that's arguably coming. You could say it's here already, right? Dr. Schatt, I think from your remarks, you could say it's here already. There's a new horizontal that's coming. And there's an icon there, and I'll tell you what the new horizontal is called. The next vertical, whatever that's going to be for life sciences. And there's also AI, which is potentially a horizontal that's coming down the pipe, right? These are sort of the stack or the pipeline of innovations that healthcare has the opportunity. The real opportunity is in this new horizontal that I want to talk to you about. And this is where sort of I landed on this concept that it's not the vertical innovations that's going to help us outperform the rest of industries. It's the horizontal and how well we adopt them. That horizontal innovation is called blockchain. How many people here have heard of blockchain? Okay. If you've heard of blockchain, I want you to right-click in your brain and delete it. How many people know how to right-click in their brain and delete it? Okay. Forget everything you know about Bitcoin that has to do with blockchain. And just think about the underlying technology of blockchain. Think about a capability that is so new around information and value exchange that it will create more value for the world than the internet. And I will describe this for you within the context of healthcare. And I hope that after the remarks that I make this afternoon, you will definitely go home and Google blockchain and start to talk to your colleagues about it. So the first thing you want to know about blockchain is it's a distributed ledger. How many people know what a ledger is? No accountants in the room. Okay, couple. A ledger is, it actually came from the church. The word actually stemmed from the early days where they kept an account of the amount of Bibles that were in a church when the Bibles were apparently very important to account for. And there was a ledge that you put the Bibles on to keep count of them, and that's where the word ledger came from. But it's an account of things that you want to keep track of. So there's accounting ledgers, there's product ledgers, there's all sorts of stuff. And because of the way technology has evolved and we started writing down things as companies, most companies keep their own copy of their own data by themselves. Agreed? And they don't share. And why do they don't share? Because there's issues of privacy, there's issues of security, there's issues of encryption, there's issues of competing commercial interest. And no one wants to be the one that monitors all the ledgers. A distributed ledger is a ledger that is owned by everyone but no one. It's one that's surveilled by everyone but no one. And it's one that's accessed by everyone, and everyone can contribute what they share. Now, the reason why blockchain is so interesting is that this particular technology did not exist until about 3-4 years ago. And it was first used for Bitcoin, to actually exchange financial currency across people from all over the world in a way where the ledger was always up to date. Here's the way it works, and here's why it's called blockchain. If everybody has a copy of the ledger, so let's say it's a spreadsheet of, I don't know, how many shirts you own. Okay? If everybody has a copy of that, let's say it's a spreadsheet of all the shirts in the world, right? A count of shirts in the world. Everybody has a copy. There are miners within the ledger, which we will have to figure out how that works in healthcare, that goes in, looks at all the transactions within a 10-second window. So all shirts that were added, or all shirts that were destroyed, or all ownership of shirts that were changed. And those miners will then write it back to every single ledger, every 10 seconds. That is called a block of work. That block of work is then chained to the block before it. And as a result, you get a running, consistent account of history over time that is timestamped and verified by everyone and can be seen by everyone and is virtually unhackable because you can't reverse it. This is why it's so interesting to Bitcoin for financial services, because in financial services, this is why you wait 3 days for your checks to clear. Because we can't figure out where the money is, and so it has to go to someone, and we have to get remittance before it comes back. This is global truth at global scale. Okay? Now, I'll give you some examples of where this is evolving in other industries and how this can help healthcare. The other thing about it is in the protocol itself, security and privacy are built in. So encryption is built in. It's a part of the miner methodology. Security and identity is built in. The biggest problem with the internet was that TCP/IP did not build in for identity. TCP/IP did not build in for encryption. For those of you who don't know what TCP/IP is, it's an acronym that describes the protocol that built the internet. Okay? And the last thing is, there's a concept of smart contracts in the protocol, which says that when a piece of work is done, or when a transaction is met, automatically, systematically, the laws of the contract can get executed, and money can be moved, or value can be moved, or data can be moved. You guys are probably thinking I'm crazy at this point. That's okay. Most of my family think I'm crazy. Here's a search that I did last night on Google on blockchain and healthcare. That is 529,000 results on the internet on blockchain and healthcare. Here's a search of images on blockchain and healthcare, over 100,000. Here's a search of videos, over 19,000 on YouTube. Here's a search on news articles, over 18,000 news articles published, press releases on blockchain and healthcare. It is that fundamental. The things that you talked about, Dr. Schatt, about not being able to scale at information sharing, not being able to protect privacy at information sharing, this is the protocol that can help that. And this is the horizontal innovation that is here that many people are calling the fourth industrial revolution. I can tell you the banks are all over it. You're probably thinking, holy shirt. Well, don't worry about shirt. My socks is what you got to check out. Okay? There's the internet, there was the cloud, and there's blockchain. It's an interconnected network where trust and consensus and identity are solved for out of the box. It actually fixes all of the design flaws of the internet. I'd like to show you a video from IBM, which is one of the leading developers and thought leaders in here, of how they're applying this within the automotive industry. As you can imagine, something that's horizontal has application for just about every industry. And I want to remind you, we're talking about 2041 in healthcare. So this is kind of like we're in 1991, I said? Right? And I'm talking about where healthcare is going to be in 2016. Would you kindly play the video for me?
Car companies make leasing look easy, but in reality, it can be quite complicated. A significant challenge faced by today's car leasing networks is that even though the physical supply chain is usually integrated, the supporting information systems are often fragmented. Imagine a world where every participant in this network could monitor, access, and share and analyze consistent and up-to-date information, irrespective of where the vehicle is in its life cycle. Imagine one agreed view of the complete vehicle history, and how this would improve service, warranty, and/or recall costs. By providing an agreed, shared record of vehicle information, as it's transferred across the supply chain, blockchain solutions from IBM can deliver just that. Let's take a look at how this would work. The government regulator creates and populates the registration for the new vehicle, which is loaded onto the blockchain. The smart contract ensures that only the regulator can do this. The regulator then transfers ownership of the vehicle to the manufacturer by invoking a transaction on the blockchain. The transaction is verified if all relevant parties agree. This is referred to as consensus, and it's made more efficient through blockchain usage. IBM Blockchain allows the validation method to be tailored to meet the needs of the business network. The manufacturer adds the make, model, and vehicle identification number to the vehicle template, again as permitted by the smart contract. This update is visible to all members of the supply chain with the right permission. For example, dealerships in the network can see the new stock availability. The vehicle can then be transferred to the dealership on execution of a smart contract of sale. Again, the transaction is verified if all relevant parties agree, and the vehicle template on the blockchain updated for all members of the network with appropriate permissions to see. After the vehicle is transferred to the leasing company, a lessee can finally lease the car. This synchronized process continues across the supply chain, as the car passes to the end user and eventually to the scrap merchant who, as governed by the smart contract, has permission to dispose of the vehicle at the end of its life. At all stages, the security, integrity, and validity of vehicle information is assured using proven cryptographic services. With IBM Blockchain, you will be able to reduce the processing time to minutes instead of days. Since all the data is now stored in a secure, distributed ledger, all members of the supply chain never have to worry about vehicle information inconsistencies, leading to increased efficiencies, improved resilience with mitigation from cybersecurity and fraud risks. And not just that, IBM Blockchain will significantly bring down the processing costs by reducing the overhead associated with intermediaries.
Thank you. I just want to outline that I don't work for IBM. I just think it's an awesome video to describe the value that blockchain could bring to other industries. Real quick, if you think about clinical trials in pharma, how many people have ever worked for pharma? Good. When we find molecules in pharma, we don't only find molecules in the area that we're looking. A lot of times we find molecules in areas that we don't care to look. And when we hire scientists within the area that we care about, within that therapeutic area. And so as a result, a lot of times we have molecules on the shelf that we don't necessarily understand, which could be secret solutions, right, to the world's biggest problem. Imagine a blockchain where all of the molecules of the world could be stored as they're identified, described, the information about them shared, ownership potentially protected on a global distributed ledger of molecules. And on the other side is another ledger of all the scientists that work for pharma and their expertise and what areas of molecules they understand. And then an economic model that can start to look at which scientist has expertise in which types of molecules and start to think about how you can find matches of capability and small molecules at the same time. Really simple example, somewhat silly because we do a little bit of this today, but this is what it means to use distributed ledger, encryption, and privacy and smart contracts at the same time. Think about a child when they're born. A blockchain for a child where every single transaction that happens to that child is stored in a block that's linked to each other, that's publicly available to all providers in the world, where permission can be set to who they can see and encryption is built in to the system. These are things that the internet could not do. That ad that we just saw from IBM, I should get off their screen. Don't want to give IBM too much airtime. These are things that the internet could not do. Right? The internet is not set up like this. And the blockchain protocol is what provides that. Now, there are a couple of things that comes from blockchain. One, trust. Trust is built into the system. Two, transparency, built into the system. Three, timing. Everything happens faster because you have a global representation of the truth. Autonomy, this one's interesting, where as long as you have internet access, which is required. Oh, I'm driving the cameraman crazy because I'm pacing back and forth. If you have internet access, anyone in any country can start to participate in this and store their information. And last but not least is this powerful idea of consensus, where you don't have to wait to be able to get permission to execute something because truth is there. And so if we think about healthcare, and we think about that moment of truth in healthcare, which is when a provider sits down with a patient, there are some things that are wrong with that experience. One is, I'm not sure who doesn't trust who. Do I trust that the patient is telling me the truth? How many people here have practiced? How many times have you had patients not tell you the truth? Several times. Does the patient trust that the doctor is telling the truth, or at least some representation of the truth? It's a broken trust system. There's always a need for more visibility. There's always a desire to go faster. There's always a sense that there's too much waste. And there seems to always be this whole concept of a second opinion. I was quoted the other day for saying the doctor is becoming the patient's first, second opinion. It's kind of interesting what's going on there, right? Patients are pre-diagnosing themselves using Dr. Google, and then coming into the office, and then providers have to undiagnose them. And that's the patient's first, second opinion, because as soon as the patient walks out the office, they go, I'm going to need another second opinion, right? Challenge for pharma, because they lose stuff along the way. Now, if you think about, let me just go back for a second. So these thoughts are completely brand new. I made up this entire perspective just for Will. I've known him for a while, and I hope this will help you guys think about it a little bit. I shared this slide deck last night with a bunch of older versions of me. I'm kind of like the young geek. I'm not going to give away all of their identity, but there's people who have invented things that everybody has in their pockets. There's people who have co-founded Fortune 500 companies of the world. This is a response from one of them. Came in last night. Good thoughts, and I'll read this out. The healthcare and blockchain specifically, we see the rise of decentralized autonomous organizations. This idea of smart contracts is creating this whole decentralization of an autonomy, which will replace traditional insurers, health finance being replaced by peer-to-peer and crowd investing. Health finance will also be the ultimate title, freedom as a service, where ultimately the end user patient will be in control of their data, including health data via some fancy layer that he's talking about. Blockchain will be the underlying fabric of healthcare, building a patient-centric healthcare system where a person's entire life cycle and journey is tracked through a system while giving control to the patients on how their data is used, how it is shared, while they have full access and are in charge of the data. This is the type of patient revolution that's going to drive information sharing in healthcare, and it's going to be driven because of blockchain. Think about a world where the custodian controls the data. I mean, that's pretty interesting, right? I also highlighted that my buddy here made a spelling on the word comments. I'll be sure to send this video to him afterwards. He's going to like that. So if you think about what we just talked about in healthcare, we have all the vertical innovations we need. I mean, yes, there are others coming, but we kind of know what the vertical innovations are that we need. Genomics, right? Some of the stuff that I can't even pronounce, Will, that's in the book, right? The question is, how do we get the horizontal vehicle to be able to get that to be deployed at scale across the entire industry globally to the 7 billion people in the world so that we can transform? That's the challenge, right? The internet was an information exchange protocol. Blockchain is a value exchange protocol. And when you combine those two together, what you get is distributed trust and consensus. And that is the challenge that we face in healthcare. I was talking to Joanne earlier, who's sitting in the back. And Joanne said to me, I spent my whole career trying to get scientists to talk to each other. Right? And I said, how's that going? She says, well, it's getting better. And I go, why? She goes, well, it's a lot more women scientists now. Sorry, I had to use that one. Right? It's just interesting that our hurdle seems to be cultural, not scientific. And I think it's a really, really, really great opportunity that we finally have a horizontal innovation that is coming to us that addresses the fundamental problems that we specifically face, which are trust, transparency, time, autonomy, and consensus. Now, that blue arrow is where I think we could go. The red arrow is, I think, where we potentially could go if we can deal with this idea of conflicting commercial interest. Make no mistake about it, I'm a capitalist. I understand that when you have a P&L and you have competitive gene in you, you don't necessarily want to share. I'm reminded of someone that refused to expense my Uber receipts 7 years ago. When I started T&Eing my Uber receipts 7 years ago, the company that I worked for at the time, the admin of my boss says, you can't expense these. These are not even real taxi receipts. What is this? I don't even know how to do this. And the other day I saw her in an Uber. It's kind of interesting, right? I think if we can get past the completing commercial interests, we can get there. When I look back now at how I arrived at this point of view, and I remind you, my job is to study the future. I also remind you of my opening remarks, which is 99% of the times I'll get it wrong. 1% of the times I'll get it right. But the value of my contribution to the world is not about right or wrong, it's about inspiration to get to the right. I think that blockchain provides massive acceleration for all the vertical innovations that this talk could have been about. And I think we have an opportunity here today in 2016 to actually influence the trajectory of healthcare as it gets into 2041. My last thing that I will say is that healthcare is one of the very few industries where the design of the industry is done by people who don't use it. Most doctors are sitting in their offices. They're actually not designing the industry. Most patients, very rarely, with the exception of our buddy over here maybe, don't get into the design of the industry. I think with the next revolution coming, with the rise of entrepreneurialism in the world, we're going to see a lot more practitioners and patients get into the game. I would offer you the following point of view. I think that we will see industry-specific blockchains that will provide massive acceleration to various industries, and I'm going to start calling that one for healthcare the care chain. If I ever see any one of you guys again, I will ask you, do you remember when you first heard about the care chain? And you'll probably go, yeah, it was some crazy kid that looked too young for the speech he was giving at the New York Academy of Science at Will's book launching. We don't suffer from a lack of vertical innovation, but it's an effective adoption of horizontal technologies. Thank you very much.